All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for watching. It is freezing cold and super windy out here, so if the audio sounds like crap, I apologize for that. But I was scrolling through my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized that it has been a really long time since we've shot the High Point. This is my High Point C9 9mm pistol. I bought this gun probably a year ago now, and the High Points are always a lot of fun to shoot, and believe it or not, the High Point videos always do really well on YouTube, which kind of tells me that either a lot of people have these guns or they're interested in buying the High Point. So I thought we would get her back out and put some more rounds through the High Point today. Now, I made a video several months ago comparing the High Point to the much more expensive Glock, and in that video I went over several reasons why I thought the Glock was superior and just overall a better gun for self-defense. And by the end of that video, the conclusion that I came up to was that the Glock was definitely the winner of that comparison. But at the end of the day, and I get this argument all the time, the only thing that matters is that you're able to effectively deliver rounds onto the target and stop the bad guy. And the High Point seems to do that just as well as any other gun out there. So there are obviously several factors that go into bullet performance and why you see different results out of different guns. We'll get into some of those here in a minute. There's also several factors that go into, what makes a gun easier to shoot or a higher quality gun, usually a better choice than something like the clunky and awkward High Point. But the argument that I always hear is that if you're not able to afford something like a Glock or a Sig or a high quality handgun, then the much cheaper High Point would be a good option for you, because again, at the end of the day, they all shoot bullets just the same, and the High Point is equally capable of stopping a threat. But I've never tested that theory. So today, that's exactly what we're gonna do. So we're gonna see if the bullet performance from the $100 High Point suffers or changes or maybe even improves when you compare it to a pistol that's 3 or 4 times the price. Let's do it. All right, so the High Point C9 has a 3.5-inch barrel, and with handguns like this, I would say the barrel length is probably the biggest determining factor in bullet performance. So if you took the same round and shot it out of a full-size Glock 17 and a subcompact Glock 43, you're gonna see a big difference in the way that bullet performs, because the longer barrel will obviously give you more velocity and better performance out of the bullet. So to make this video as fair as possible and to give the cheap little High Point the best shot that it has, I brought out what I think is the best gun to do this comparison. So this is the Sig P365 XL. Now this gun actually has a 3.7-inch barrel, so they're not exactly the same size, but pretty dang close, and I would consider these two barrels to be in the same category, so definitely close enough to compare. Now, one more factor that could play a role in bullet performance is the rifling of the barrel. So I kind of throw that into the category of how well the pistols are made, and that's what we're here to find out. So if the High Point is more cheaply made and the rifling is inferior quality, then that might show up in some of our tests. That could be a place where they skimp on the High Point and the Sig will outperform it. We'll find out. All right, function check. Not a good start. The High Point has done this ever since I bought it. Hit it home and it's good to go. All right. Not bad. And the Sig. One thing I noticed when I switched from the High Point to a better gun, the trigger feels like a hair trigger. I've even had rounds go off when I didn't mean to sometimes, because the triggers are just so much different. All right. And the Sig's working. Obviously the Sig holds more rounds, but I just put 8 in it since that's what the High Point holds. Let's try some rapid fire. Man, for a small gun, the Sig is so easy to shoot. And the High Point. There it went. Maybe we're breaking it in after a year and a half. All right, rapid fire. Man, I had one hiccup there in the beginning, but after that, actually not too bad. So it wouldn't be a High Point video if I didn't make fun of this thing a little bit. Obviously you guys know that I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the High Points. The capacity is a biggie for me. It only holds 8 rounds and it's like the size of a Glock 19, probably even thicker. My buddy from Turtle Lake Tactical actually summed this up perfectly the other day. So he has a High Point carbine and he said that it always works 100% of the time, never jams, but it always feels like it's on the verge of malfunctioning. And that is exactly how I feel about the High Point C9. I've never had a malfunction out of it other than the slide sticking, but that's not a malfunction. That's just, you know, a weird quirk that it has. But once you start shooting it, it works, and it just chugs ammo like any other gun out there. But it always feels like it's gonna jam. I'm just waiting on it to have a jam, but it doesn't. It just keeps working, so it's an interesting feeling. By the way, I wasn't talking like this before I came out here. Now all of a sudden I'm super stuffed up. So as usual, I'm way underdressed for how cold it is out here. But now we're gonna get into some of the performance testing. So right here we have a paper target bad guy, and first I just want to shoot a few rounds out of each of these guns just to make sure everything's shooting straight and the high point's not keyholing or anything like that. That's very unlikely, probably not going to happen, but sometimes that stuff does happen. So first we'll shoot paper, and then we'll start doing some ammo testing. All right, we'll start with the Sig. I'll probably do headshots with the Sig, body shots with the high point. Well, I put two in the same hole, which wasn't intentional. All right, our high point, the slide is finally starting to work on the high point. Hopefully it's breaking in. All right. Let's check them out. By the way, keyholing is much more common with rifles. It's easier to see on paper with rifles as well because the bullets are so much longer, but I don't really see it with pistols very often, but this is just precautionary, just to exclude the possibility before we start testing our ammo. So you can see our paper target here. Up top was the Sig P365. Again, I got two bullets in the exact same hole, which wasn't intentional, but the third one looks good, and then all three holes from our high point look good as well. So moving on. All right guys, next we're going to chronograph a couple rounds out of each of these guns and see what kind of velocities we're getting. So for those of you that don't know, chronographs basically just tell you how many feet per second the bullets are going. So for this test, I have a couple different self-defense rounds we're going to shoot. We have the 115 grain Sig V Crown and the 147 grain Sig V Crown. So we have a light 9mm and a heavier 9mm. We're going to shoot 5 rounds out of each gun and just see how consistent and how fast the velocities are. So if there is a big difference in the quality of the barrel or the rifling of the barrel or something like that, I think the velocity would be where we would see that difference. So we're starting with the 115 grain Sig V Crown, and we'll start with the high point. Man, we're like 3 for 3 on the slide going home today. By the way, we're at like 5 yards, I would say. And the sun is brutal. 1141. 1125. 1100. 1133. And 1136. All right, now the P365 XL. Same exact ammo. Again, I apologize for the glare. The sun is brutal today. All right. 1177. 1174. 1205. 1215. 1178. Definitely a difference. All right, so I hope this don't upset anybody, but I'm actually gonna skip the 147 grain chronograph test because I'm running out of time and I don't want this video to be too long and drawn out. But I think we get the point. So the average velocity from the high point was 1,127 feet per second. And the difference from the slowest to the fastest was 41 feet per second. So all of those rounds fell between 1,100 and 1,141 feet per second out of the high point. Now out of the Sig P365 XL, our average was 1,190 feet per second. So that's a 63 feet per second increase. And again, the difference from the lowest to the highest was also 41 feet per second. So that's kind of strange that the difference was the exact same. But again, 63 feet per second from the high point to the Sig. Now, that could be attributed to the 0.2 of an inch that you have added onto that barrel. Like I said, the Sig is a 3.7 inch barrel and the high point is a 3.5 inch barrel. I'm not an ammo expert like that, so I don't know. They seemed quite a bit higher to me. I don't know if that little bit would make that much of a difference. I know it could make a difference, obviously, but I don't know if it would make that much of a difference. And either way, I gotta say, this is still a smaller gun. So you could say that it's got a longer barrel, and obviously it does by 0.2 of an inch, but if you look at these side by side, the Sig is still overall the shorter gun, and it's definitely a lot thinner as well. So that's kind of what you pay for when you get the $150 high point. It's just way too big for what you get out of a gun this size. Again, I'm not a chronograph expert. Maybe somebody in the comments could touch on that, but the velocity difference was definitely bigger than I expected it to be. So it could be just that 2/10 of an inch that's added onto the barrel, or it could be that the Sig is obviously made differently and somehow is getting more pressure out of those rounds. All right, now I got my 20% clear ballistic shell block on the railroad tie there, and this is probably the most important test because this is gonna actually show us how the bullets are performing and expanding in ballistic shell. So we're gonna use the same rounds that we just shot in the chronograph test, the 115 grain Sig V Crown, and we're gonna start with the high point. I am expecting to see a little difference after that chronograph test, but how big of a difference, I'm not really sure. Should probably put my earplugs back in. All right, so you can see where that bullet went in right there, and then the wound cavity from the side here. Nothing impressive. I haven't tested these rounds before, so I'm not really sure what they would do out of a full-size gun, but you can see the bullet came down to the end of the gel block right there. It does look like it expanded pretty well. I don't have a tape measure on me, but I would say that's probably 13 or 14 inches into the ballistic shell, so not bad from the high point. Let's see how the Sig does. All right, so our shot from the Sig is on the right-hand side of the gel block there, and I don't know if you guys will be able to see this, but the wound cavity from the P365 is definitely bigger. There's no doubt about that. And then over here, you can kind of see it. Again, it is hidden behind the shot from the high point, but our bullet continued down the gel block and stopped right there. So probably a ½ an inch less penetration than we got from the high point. And again, it does look like the bullet expanded a little bit more. I will dig these out when we're done and look at them, but it got about a ½ an inch, maybe an inch less penetration than the high point. So it probably did expand faster and maybe to a bigger diameter, but not really that much of a difference at all. All right, now we're gonna shoot the 147 grain Sig V Crown. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of nervous that these might penetrate all the way through the gel because I only have one gel block out here today, but I guess we'll see. Once again, starting with the high point. Put this one. And the Sig. All right, so the 147 grain from the high point is right there on the left, and the one from the Sig is right there on the bottom. So if you go over here, the wound cavities look almost identical, actually, for the 147 grain rounds. If you see further down the gel block here, you can see where our bullet stopped. So the one on top is actually from the high point, and the one on bottom is the round from the Sig. So similar expansion. Again, we will look at these closer, but they don't look too much different. And again, I would say there's about a ½ an inch difference in the penetration between those two rounds. So actually, this time the high point got less penetration and the Sig penetrated about a ½ an inch further. With the 115 grain, it was the opposite. The Sig stopped a little shorter and the high point went a little bit further. But either way, really no difference. I mean, I would say that difference is negligible, and you're not gonna get any better terminal ballistics out of one gun or the other. They both look like they're doing about the same thing. All right, so we got the bullets out of the gel block. There's not really too much to see here, but I'll go ahead and show you guys anyways. By the way, I about cut my finger off trying to get these bullets out of here. But you can see the 115 grains. There's really not much of a difference. The one on the left is out of the Sig, and the one on the right is the high point. And the one that we shot from the Sig is just a little bit bigger, expanded just a little bit more. And again, it did penetrate a little less, but really not too much of a difference. And the little difference that is there, again, could be because of the slightly longer barrel from the Sig. Now, with the 147 grains, you can see there's literally no difference. I can't even tell which one is which now that I've got them out of the gel block. These are literally identical. So not too much of a difference from the Sig to the high point and the ballistic shell test. Well, everybody, that is gonna do it for me today. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. The lesson that I learned today is that there's pretty much no difference, and if there are, the differences are negligible when it comes to bullet performance out of these two guns. And coming into this video, I was leaning that way. I didn't really know what to expect because the processes for manufacturing and quality control and the parts used and all that stuff are very different between these two guns. Obviously, they're just in two different price categories. The chronograph test did show a bigger difference than I was expecting, but other than that, the High Point did pretty much everything the Sig did that cost 3 or 4 times the price. So all of you High Point fans can finally be happy with the video that I make. I'm not completely bashing on it. I know a lot of people think that I just hate High Points. I really don't. I just don't think they're fun to shoot, and they're just weird and clunky, and obviously there are much better options out there. But when it comes to putting rounds on target and getting the job done, obviously the High Point is very capable of doing that, and as we saw today, you're not really losing any terminal effect or ballistic performance because you're using a crappy High Point. So that being said, I'm impressed with the High Point. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please let me know down in the comments, and as always, hit that like button for me. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching, and remember, High Points still suck. I'll see you next time.